If there's one lesson that horror films have taught us over the years, it's to be afraid of the dark. Most bad things, if they're gonna happen, are gonna happen at night with the lights out. But what if darkness actually could kill you? That's the clever question that 2016's Lights Out asks. Hello, welcome to our channel. Get a chance to be featured in our future videos by suggesting underrated movies you want us to recap. Just leave a comment down below.
It's nighttime at Wells Textiles, and Paul is working the night shift with just a few hours to go. He gets a FaceTime call from his son Martin, who's wondering when he's coming home. His mom is suffering from a mental illness and she's having a rough night. Martin says she's been talking to herself tonight. Paul is visibly concerned and promises Martin he'll be home later. His colleague Esther pops in to say goodnight and goes to leave home for the evening. As she switches off the light in her office, she notices the strange silhouette of someone standing in the room. Startled, she turns the light on to see clearly, but the shape has vanished. When she turns the light back on, the shape has reappeared. She repeats this a few times, and over again, the shape returns when the lights are switched off. Suddenly, the shape appears much closer than before, and Esther takes off running back to Paul. He's on the phone to someone discussing having an intervention for his wife when Esther enters, shaken, and tells him that there's something in the back room.
Paul shrugs it off and tells Esther to leave. It's probably nothing, right?
An hour later, Paul has finished his shift and he's leaving the dimly lit building, poorly lit with spaced out spotlights. As he makes his way out, he spots the same figure that Esther saw, only this time we could tell it's angry. It snatches at his legs, tearing his jeans and drawing blood, but Paul notices that it can't cross into the light where he stood. As it watches and whispers eerily, he makes a quick break for a well-lit office, grabbing a bat and preparing himself. Suddenly, the lights flicker out and the door opens, revealing thick darkness beyond. Without warning, Paul is snatched from behind and wrenched into the darkness. The next time we see him, he's been brutally killed and his eyes have been gouged from their sockets. We cut to Rebecca in bed with her boyfriend, Brett. Brett is keen to stay the night, but Rebecca is keeping her distance. In fact, she doesn't even like the title boyfriend at this stage, even though Brett says that they've been seeing each other for 8 months. He tries to make her let him keep a pair of jeans, even a sock in her room, but she's not having any of it and she ushers him out into the night. As she goes to bed, the camera pans and reveals her standing with her younger brother. It's Martin from the opening of the film. At home, Martin is in bed watching TV. He hears a creak outside of his room. He tiptoes across the landing to find his mom, Sophie, standing in her room, talking to what appears to be an empty cupboard.
That being said, she seems perfectly sound of mind except for this strange behavior.
She asks if we woke him, which obviously leaves him a little confused. She tells him he should go back to bed, that only grown-ups should be up at this time of night. Being a good kid, he obeys, but as he turns around to say goodnight, he sees a sinister black, claw-like hand curl around the doorframe. Rushing for his bed, locking the door and diving under the covers, he hears a horrid loud scraping on the other side of the door as an unseen presence thumps at it, trying to get in. The next day at school, Martin is sick and of course his mom isn't able to come and collect him, so instead they call on his big sister Rebecca to come and collect him. Rebecca arrives with her not-boyfriend, Brett, in tow. Here, we get a quick insight to Rebecca's background as she reveals that Paul was her only stepfather. Her real dad ran off when she was 10 years old. Apparently, Martin has fallen asleep in class again for the 3rd time this week. He pleads to come home with Rebecca instead. He needs a safe space where he can sleep. Rebecca is skeptical, but agrees and takes him home first to get his things. Rebecca tells Martin that their mom is often sick and asks how she's been. He says that someone's been coming over a lot, someone called Diana. This revelation stops Rebecca in her tracks. She reveals she used to have nightmares about Diana a lot when she was younger, around the time that their mom drove her dad away. When Martin collects his things, Rebecca confronts their mom about how she's been behaving and how long she's been off her meds. Rebecca has seen enough. She puts her foot down and tells that until Sophie is better, Martin will be staying with her. Brett is unsure about the whole situation. He's wondering whether Rebecca is doing this to help Martin or to hurt her mother. The question is more than Rebecca can handle, and she tells Brett he has to leave. That night, Rebecca sleeps by the flashing red neon tattoo sign outside her room. She wakes and finds Martin isn't in bed beside her. Hearing him beside her bed, she asks what he's doing, only that isn't Martin, is it? As the sign flashes on and off, the strange shape in her room vanishes and reappears.
It looks up at her, making a sickening crunching noise with every moment before letting rip an unearthly shriek and throwing itself at her.
She switches all the lights on in her room and finds Martin asleep in the bath, clutching his flashlight, which is switched on, of course. The next morning, the child services agent from Martin's school knocks at her door. It's got back to her that Martin is staying with her. Her hands are tied, and unless Rebecca presses charges against her mom and proves her home is a safe place for Martin, he has to return home. Rebecca finds herself in an impossible situation and has to give Martin back. After he leaves, she begins tidying up and notices something on the floor, the word Diana scratched into the wood along with a crude stick figure. This triggers an old memory, and suddenly we are in her childhood bedroom drawing in her sketchbook, which vanishes and appears in her cupboard. The image her father smeared in black with the same stick figure stood with her family. Rebecca returns home to confront her mother about what's been happening. Finding the home empty, they look around and Rebecca finds an old photo of two little girls on a sunny street, one of them shaded and obscured under the protection of an umbrella. She finds an old recording from a hospital and presses play. The doctor recounts the story of two of his patients, a girl named Diana with a terrible sensitivity to light and a history of aggression, and another girl named Sophie, Rebecca's mom. Diana is obsessed with Sophie and apparently won't leave her alone. She's even gone as far to injure her so she can't leave. As the tape plays out, we hear what sounds like a horrific experiment on Diana going horribly wrong as she shrieks in agony while the doctor yells for his colleagues to turn a machine off. Later that day, Sophie is bringing Martin home and suggests a quiet movie night to help take their minds off the stressful last few days. A quiet night just for the three of them. Later, Sophie switches the lights off and tries to explain her situation to Martin and what happened to her and her special friend, Diana, when they were young.
Maria Bello plays a very reasonable, relaxed take on this tortured character, and it truly adds to the uncomfortable atmosphere, especially in this moment.
Diana reveals herself, but Martin fights back and runs away. Diana is furious and strikes Sophie, leaving her lying on the floor alone. Martin runs back to Rebecca's and tells her that it's getting worse, pleading with her to believe him. To his relief, Rebecca is right there with him and shows him all the research that Paul has been doing on the history of their mother. Apparently, Diana was found locked in the basement of her home at 13 years old. Her father had taken his own life. Diana appeared to have this strange ability to work her way inside people's minds and change them. Rebecca thinks this is what Diana has done to their mom. An experimental treatment meant to save Diana instead killed her, and now they think their mom is Diana's only connection to the world, and that the closer they get to trying to stop her, the more dangerous she'll get. Just like that, a knock at the door, and Rebecca is expecting it to be their takeout. But we, as educated horror movie fans, know better than that, don't we? There's no one at the door, and all of a sudden, the knocking seems to be coming from inside the house, and Martin is dragged underneath the bed. Bravely saving him, Rebecca decides she has to confront her mom about Diana. At her mom's house, Sophie is convinced that Diana is still alive. She refuses to believe that the treatment killed her. She won't accept that she has died and insists that she's still alive, that Rebecca is the crazy one for thinking she's dead. Martin insists that they stay that night. Crazy as their mom seems, he feels a duty to her. She's sick and they all need to rally around her now when she's at her most vulnerable. They rig the house to be Diana-proof, taping over all the light switches and putting bulbs into all the empty lamps.
This scene feels a bit like a Home Alone moment, only it's not thieves, but a murderous ghost who's scared of the light.
Rebecca is slowly being won over by Brett, who has stuck by her and her family throughout these crazy events. He's proven to be a real rock, and after they share a tender kiss, she finally agrees to let him keep his clothes in the bottom drawer of her bedroom chest of drawers.
He's won a tiny victory, and it's a very endearing moment that shows the good that's come from this terrible series of events.
Before she goes to bed, Rebecca knocks on her mom's door and tells her they're staying the night. Sophie seems different, calm, but still not in the spooky ways she has seemed. She wants to start afresh in the morning and presses a note into Rebecca's hand before going back into her room, though in this moment she seems genuinely afraid, as though she's being pulled back. The note simply reads, "I need help." Later that day, the three awake to find all the power in the house is out. Even the streetlights are off. It seems like tonight Diana is playing for keeps. Rebecca goes to look for the fuse cupboard in the basement, leaving Martin to fend for himself by candlelight. It doesn't take long for Diana to come for him and chase him into the basement, upon which Diana slams the door and traps them both. Brett attempts to free them, but he is at the mercy of Diana in this big dark house, full of shadows with plenty of places for Diana to hide. After throwing him around without mercy, Brett escapes and uses the headlights on his car to chase Diana away before fleeing. Rebecca and Martin hear the car drive off, but Rebecca refuses to believe the man who she's just let into her life is leaving them. Meanwhile, upstairs, Sophie confronts Diana, who sulks about in the darkness of their home. Sophie has had enough of Diana threatening her kids, and as she is about to take the medication that will rid her of the weakness that Diana preys on, Diana knocks her down and the pills scatter over the floor. Rebecca and Martin find a backlight in the basement, and as she explores the dark corridors, she finds eerie messages from Diana scrawled over the wall. These messages give us an insight into Diana's mind and her obsession with Sophie. Rebecca finds a series of mannequins, their faces melted and disfigured, and as she observes them all, one suddenly springs to life. It's Diana.
She stalks them around the tunnels of the basement, but this time they have one advantage. The backlight doesn't make her disappear, so while it won't keep them safe, at least they'll be able to see her.
Suddenly, sirens blare from outside and they realize that Brett has returned with the police. They refuse to listen to his pleas to take torches, and sure enough, once they save the kids from the basement, they are easy prey for Diana. Rebecca sends Martin out of the house with Brett, staying behind to search for their mom, stalking through the darkness with only the backlight to light her way. Diana curses her from the dark and tells her to leave. Striking out from the darkness, she causes Rebecca to drop her torch, leaving her defenseless. As she stands over Rebecca, ready to deliver the killing blow, Sophie appears with a gun pointed at Diana. Realizing the gun won't stop her, she turns it on herself. With no Sophie there could be no Diana. She pulls the trigger, and as she dies, Diana vanishes, ending the cycle of pain. The film ends with Rebecca, Martin, and Brett hurtled up in the back of an ambulance as the emergency services flock to the scene, and it looks like, for once, this horror film is giving us a rare happy ending.
Lights Out is a fun, easy horror with an interesting central premise. The way the family drama intertwines with the spooky Diana is really nicely done, and the clever uses of her being trapped to dark spots could have featured more throughout the movie, but were definitely an interesting thing to watch. Overall, this is a great Saturday night horror with fantastic performances from the main cast and a pleasantly short runtime, which should always be saluted. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload. Also, don't forget to suggest movies you want us to recap in the future in the comments down below.